mostly, and I think one of the reasons I gravitate towards, having businesses that help entrepreneurs is that I love entrepreneurs. I want entrepreneurs to succeed, and I recognized in inventory something that I was struggling with, and in asking my friends, they were struggling with. And so
Hey guys, welcome back to Zoncom Podcast. This is Andrew Erickson. As always, I am very excited to be here with Chelsea Cohen. Chelsea Cohen is one of my really good friends that I see at all these different events all across the world. Super excited to have her finally on the podcast. Chelsea's big thing now that she is known for in the industry is being the co-founder of SoStocked. SoStocked.com is a website that does Amazon inventory management. This thing is a killer tool. If you have ever struggled with inventory management, which yes, you have. If you're an Amazon seller, yes, you have struggled with that. So you are not an Amazon seller unless you have known those struggles of inventory management. This is the best tool that I've actually personally used that really gives you a good grip and a good grasp of that inventory management. Chelsea, I know, also used to do copywriting, or maybe you still do copywriting. So thank you so much for being here. Super excited to have you.
yeah, thanks so much for having me. I know we go way back to Orlando with one of those first Titan events. And
Yep.
yeah, that was fantastic. I think we had dinner together, and that's where we first connected.
Yeah, for sure. Did you ever go to China Magic?
I did. I'm trying to remember which year. I think it was like 20, I want to say like 2016 or 2017, one of those times in
Maybe we saw
October.
each other there too. I'm not sure, but
Possibly. I did speak on copywriting there, and that was just before I started my copywriting agency, which yes, I do still have that agency running as well.
nice. And that's what is that, like badass copyright or something?
Badass Business Builders. I'm currently working on a rebrand. We're building a website and rebranding as Catapult Conversion. So that should be coming out in the next couple months or so.
Nice. I love it. Chelsea is obviously a serial entrepreneur, and that is something that we are very excited about in this space because myself and also most of the people who listen are also serial entrepreneurs. So you are in good company, Chelsea. So I wanted to bring you on today to talk about some inventory stuff. Like I said, everyone struggles with it. It's so hard. Inventory is so expensive. Over ordering, it ties up too much cash, and under ordering, of course, we end up end up going out of stock, and we end up not being able to make any sales, right? Which is actually worse, in my opinion, than being overstocked. So Chelsea, I'm excited to have her here to talk about inventory management. So Chelsea, why don't you give us a little, before we jump into like the inventory stuff, why don't you kind of give us a little bit of your entrepreneurial journey? Like, how did you get into this Amazon space?
Sure. So I've always wanted to own my own business. And in 2014, I got into a multi-level marketing company and was going around, I swore off multi-level and then somehow got roped into it. So I was talking to a bunch of friends of mine, trying to get them to sign up for my deal. And they all kept saying, well, that's great, but we are going to be putting all our money into this thing called the Amazing Selling Machine. And, it's this thing where it teaches you how to sell products on Amazon. So we started kind of digging into that. We thought, well, this sounds much cooler than what we're doing. And that's how we kind of got started. We signed up for Amazing Selling Machine, made our first sale in July of 2014. And that was kind of the start of our journey. Really, after that, kind of started to inadvertently become trainers because we had friends that wanted to sign up. They saw we were successful, kept asking questions. And that was kind of how Badass Business Builders actually got started, was answering questions. We kept answering the same questions over and over again. We started just making videos and saying, here, go to this website, sign up for this free membership and watch these videos. And that was kind of, the start of kind of transitioning from, just being sellers to being kind of, I guess, I don't know if you would call it influencers or whatever it was. Just we had this kind of small following of friends who were trying to get into the space.
Nice. I love it. I love it. So do you still sell on Amazon or just
Yep.
nice?
Yep. It's important for, various different aspects besides just selling, but also, to be able to continue to experience the pain that other people experience in in the inventory space. Like when I do experience problems in inventory, we'll be sitting there, I'll be talking with Ari, and we'll be really frustrated with the situation in inventory. And I'll just be like, you know what, this is good because now, and I'll have all these ideas for future, features that we need to build out, future training, and all of that. So it gives me a lot to be in the trenches and dealing with all of those challenges ourselves.
Nice. Yeah. Scratching your own itch is one of the best ways to figure out how to create a product. So it sounds like, yes, you do have lots of experience with a really annoying inventory management problem that we all have. So you kind of told me that you have a few killer tips for us, and I want to hear some of those things. You mentioned inventory minded marketing. I was like, oh, what is that? And then you started explaining it to me. I was like, no, don't tell me. Just tell me on the podcast. I want to hear it. What is this inventory minded marketing?
Yeah. So that's a term that I actually coined just working with sellers. When we first created SoStocked, I worked with sellers to get them onboarded onto the software. For the first year and a half, I was the only one doing that. So between my partner and myself, we were the only ones talking to users and developing the software as we go, improving it. And this thing kept coming up of people marketing themselves into stockouts. And we're talking about, all across the board. We even experienced 8-figure sellers who were marketing themselves into stockouts because they weren't vetting their inventory against their marketing plans. You go to an event, you find this really, amazing tip, and then you try it, increases your conversion or your traffic or whatever it does. And then all of a sudden you're stocking out because you hadn't factored the inventory burn rate into that equation. So inventory minded marketing was a term that I coined to communicate the idea that these two teams need to work together. And there's a couple of different ways that actually needs to happen. First and foremost being that the marketing team needs to communicate their plans to the inventory team, right? So that's kind of the first impetus of how inventory minded marketing started. Of course, it has evolved since restock limits to become more refined as well.
Yeah, that's one thing I found frustrating is that when people tell me, oh, well, let's do some lightning deals. Oh, cool. Let's do some big promos. Let's do some big like giveaways and stuff. And I'm like, the stock limits though are like, they're so restricting that I'm just like, I just am trying to get stock in that will just sell without promotions right now. Like this, like, I don't know. So
yeah.
One thing I noticed actually, and maybe you probably know this more than I do, but I noticed this last week, we're recording the first part of February right now. This last week, which is this kind of first week, the last week of January, first week of February, the limits went up dramatically.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely have. And Amazon has said that they want to get rid of it. I don't see that happening this year fully. And I don't know if I actually will see that, believe that would happen at all. I just, it's kind of like income tax. Once they instituted income tax, when they repealed prohibition and got back the alcohol tax, they weren't so keen to get rid of the income tax. It was just like, it's too much of a draw for them to be able to control the flow of things in that way. So I don't think they'll get rid of it. But they have been building a lot of additional warehouses. So I think that's part of it. And also not kind of being on the other side of the Christmas rush.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting when because I talked to a lot of people who are new in the industry, people have been here for a long time, and I guess I'm now, because I've been in the industry for 6-7 years. I guess I'm considered like a senior citizen now in the industry. Like 6 years makes you like ancient, I guess. But man, I'm just thinking like, what did it used to be like when I first started? My first product was oversized, so it's over 18 inches, and it was I had a 500 unit limit.
Wow.
And yeah, and it was super frustrating because like I didn't have a 3PL. I didn't have I live in a tiny condo in downtown San Diego. Now I live in the suburbs. I have a much bigger house in the suburbs, but like the tiny condo, I can't hold inventory there. And so I had to just like call some self-storage places and just like find a place. I had this like big truck delivered like a bunch of stuff at the self-storage place. And I just put in the self-storage, and then I would go in every week because I don't know if they had 3PLs. I'm sure they had 3PLs back then, but I didn't know about 3PLs.
Yeah.
And so I had it, and I wasn't an ASM, so I just like was just alone. And so I had all the stuff in self-storage, and then I would go in on the weekend or on my lunch break, and I would go and get like 200 units out every week and then like bring them to the UPS store and hand them off. And they're all kind of dirty because it's a warehouse. And so I'd like change out of my business casual clothes and put on like workout clothes, move all the stuff out, and then like send it to the post office and stuff. And like, it was a pain, right? And now I think back, anytime I complain about, oh my God, my storage limit is 6,000 units. Really, Amazon? Come on. I think back,
Yeah.
I'm like, man, it used to be 500. And I used to have to like pick it up myself, and it's much better now.
And I think it's because you were in overstock, because we never had any storage restrictions. One time, one Christmas, we had some sort of a limit, and we actually had to get right in to get them to increase the limit. But that was the only time that we ever had any problem in, the 6 years that I've been doing this up into 2020. And then of course 2020, everything changed. So there were limits, but it was I think a lot of it had to do with oversize, as well as IPI score limits, like storage volume limits. And yeah, restock limits weren't really a huge thing for a lot of sellers. So that's why you've got a lot of sellers who, we're not used to this. We're not used to, it's kind of like, a parent letting you do anything you want and all of a sudden being like, you know what? Here are some ground rules. And you're like, what are you talking about? Like, I've been going out and partying, to 2 a.m. It's like that type of a spoiled mentality that we've had where we haven't had to face inventory management. It's just send it in. If it sells, it sells. If it doesn't, it doesn't. We're making enough money with enough margin that it doesn't really hurt us when we get these long-term storage fees with a couple of these products that didn't end up working out. Nowadays, there's no more margin to hide in.
Yeah, that's a very good point. No more margin of hiding. I like that. That's a good point. And I know like a long time ago, right? That was kind of a little bit before my time, is that Amazon used to have like long-term storage where you could kind of like move your stuff into like 1 year long storage bins. Oh my God, that would be amazing if we could have that now. Now our storage limits are like 5 weeks. Amazon used to let us have like over a year if you were standard size, that is.
There are other programs. There are programs that they're beta testing right now, upstream storage. You have to send a full container. It has to come from China. You have to do it through Amazon Logistics, but they will they'll take in a container, they'll store it off site, and then they'll send it into FBA, and you'll be able to see that all on your global inventory dashboard. So those are new services. You are putting all of your faith in Amazon that they'll be able to manage things for you. But we've got a couple of members of SoStocked who are trying it out, and they basically reached out to us because they didn't know how it was going to show up and if we were going to have to make advancements. Luckily, they were able to just basically build it as an additional third-party warehouse and keep it recorded, so we didn't have to make any tweaks to the system to be able to accommodate. But it's definitely something that's coming up, and we've got guinea pigs who are testing it out, seeing if it's something viable before going out and telling people to invest their time and money in it.
That's a hot tip. I like that. I did not know about that. How do we get into that program?
Yeah, I think it's called STAR. I don't remember what STAR stands for,
Star.
but you also can look up upstream storage. Yeah, it's definitely an upcoming product. I think we have probably mentioned it we have Amazon News. If you go to sostock.com/news and search for, upstream or something like that, you should be able to find it. We do weekly news announcements, and I think we wrote something up about it.
Nice. That's great. I love that. Yeah, check that out on SoStock's website, Upstream Storage. That's with Amazon Global Logistics, AGL. So interesting. We'll make sure to put a link in the show notes for the audience. So that's awesome. There you go. That's a nice hot tip right there. So I know. So the thing that's so frustrating, again, like kind of thinking back historically. So I did have the 500 unit oversized limit, right?
Yep.
And then we had the 1 year storage. I remember 7 years ago, whatever, when people were complaining that Amazon kind of got rid of the 1 year storage limits.
Yeah, I don't remember that. So it must have been like maybe towards the beginning of 2014, or just I was so new that I wasn't paying attention to all of that stuff. I didn't have 1 year storage back then.
Yeah, and people were complaining about. They're like, "Oh, I can't believe it! Now I have to order. Like, I can only order 8 months at a time."
Wow.
And yeah, and so that was back then. That was
horrible in turnover. Yeah. Funny.
So that was back then, right?
Yeah.
And then we kind of went into the IPI thing happened 2 or 3 years ago. That was the Inventory Performance Index or something, whatever. It's just some score they give you. And it's basically based on sell-through rate and the volume of your product and blah, blah, blah. We got hit with that pretty hard 2 years ago as
Uh-huh.
well. So they basically restrict you to only having it's complicated how the whole system works, but basically they restricted about 6 weeks worth of inventory at Amazon. So
Yeah.
we've been playing with that for the last like 2-3 years, that kind of like living in that stupid space of like only having a month-ish of
Yeah.
inventory there. And then that changed, and that went to ASIN limits, and then that went to storage account limits, and now they're getting rid of the account limits, but they're going to sell the IPI and blah 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 blah. All these things, all these things constantly moving, and they give you like,
Yeah.
it's like 7 days notice.
Uh-huh.
So can you tell me, I know you mentioned before about being flexible.
Yeah.
What's your advice on like how to deal with this like volatility in the storage market?
Yeah. Well, there are a couple of things. There's flexible logistics, and there's also, in terms of the inventory minded marketing, the flip side of that, which really developed with restock limits. I used to talk a lot about inventory minded marketing and putting all the responsibility on marketing. You need to tell inventory what you're doing. And then it became, you know what? Inventory is also responsible, and inventory can't be, kind of sitting back and being reactionary. And inventory has been very reactionary in the past, in that, oh, well, look, we're running out of stock. Shoot, we should do something about it. But essentially, what one of the things developed was there need to be 4 different reports that inventory sends to marketing, at least these four reports. These are the 4 main reports. One would be the stock out risk report, right? So inventory should know when that, drop dead date is, when am I actually going to stock out? And if sales ramp up, they need to be able to spot that. So a report should weekly or monthly, depending on how quickly your business is moving, but more likely weekly, send a stock out risk report to marketing so that marketing can see, if they've got an ASIN on their promo list that they're about to push heavily on, but it's on the stock out risk report, that's a problem. They need to start pulling back and see if they can stop that from happening. So that would be something where you would see it. Is there a stock out? How many days of stock out? What's the date of the stock out? And that way marketing can try to reevaluate if they're able to help to avoid that stock out without tanking the page ranking very, very easily. So that would be like the first report. Second would be a slow sellers report. Slow sellers report would be like a range. It would be a range like, on the lower end. So let's say between 5 and 20 units. If it's selling between 5 and 20 units for some businesses, maybe that's considered a slow seller. It's not one of those like dead products, but it's a slow seller. And it's one of these where marketing needs to look at that and take that very seriously, because if it's a slow seller, it could become a liability. One of the things I like to talk about is that inventory can be an asset or a liability, right? And it's often it's on our books as, on our balance sheet as an asset, but it becomes a liability when it costs us more than it's going to make us in its life cycle. That side of liability, it's also keeping our capital tied up. So that's another liability. And then it's potentially taking space and gathering fees. And that's a liability. So if it's harming your restock limits and it's harming your ability to send best sellers in, you need to have a strategy for moving those slow sellers and moving them either moving them out or moving them into a viable range. And using that, the other aspect of, you have this inventory, it could be an asset because you can use it to increase your restock limits. When we had ASIN type, that was not possible. And so, as much as people bitched about storage type because their storage limits went down so far, and it also tied everything up with all of their slow sellers, it becomes, this thing of understanding that excess inventory is a tool that you can use. Even if you're losing on it, like if you ask any top seller, if you could buy more restock limits, would you? They would all raise their hands. Yeah, how much? How much would be the immediate response? How much do you need? How much would we get? To flip your mindset into realizing that you can buy restock limits simply by moving those slow sellers. You decide to run a marketing campaign, and your marketing team needs to think like that. Let's run a marketing campaign to move this inventory so that we can increase our restock limits and get some of that cash back. So that would be the slow sellers report. Liquidation would be the same, only it would be those dead or dying products. And it's just, let's get rid of it. Let's not necessarily liquidate it, meaning pull it from Amazon. Let's figure out how to burn through it so that it actually helps us with restock limits, increasing restock limits. Unless it's an emergency and we can't get our best sellers in and we're about to stock out, then maybe you would pull that inventory. And then, of course, the last one would be your overstock report. What inventory, even of my best sellers, do I have over 60 days or over 90 days of inventory? That also is an asset that you can use to boost your restock limits and to boost your page rankings, to make a more viable product with increased sales velocity. So that's or kind of the, in terms of the full panorama of the game plan and how exactly inventory and marketing need to be working together. That's kind of the first objective, from a restock limits perspective.
Nice. I love that. So basically, look at your marketing, look at your slow sellers, look at your liquidation, look at your overstock. So
Yeah.
really, I mean, if anything, it's kind of like marketing and your slow move. I mean, if you want to put those last three kind of in one big category of like just the slow pokes. So
Yeah.
like the marketing, the great stuff, and getting rid of the slow pokes.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and seeing what overstock you have that you can use to kind of push those limits, as well. Because we need to start looking at the fact, I mean, every month that you have inventory, it's your margins are shrinking because of your storage, your monthly storage fees. So kind of looking at inventory, as a tool, and as a marketing tool. And I think that's the shift that a lot of marketers need to start making, especially as restock limits continue to be a problem for some people.
Yeah, it's interesting storage fees. So 2 years ago, we got a bill or we got a whatever charge
Yeah.
for our storage. Our margins were pretty good.
Uh-huh.
And then we got our storage and it didn't kill our margins by any means, but it was a very large bill that we paid $87,000.
Wow. Yeah.
$65,000 of those were during Q4 or 60 well, whatever. It's basically it was 80 something and we paid 60, high 60s, low 70s in Q4.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I was like, oh my God, I was not budgeting an $80,000 or $60,000 storage fee. So
Yeah.
they could really get you.
Mm-hmm.
But here's one thing I always tell people, like, remember, so our product, just to give a kind of perspective of what we were selling, it was a bulkier item. It was a 18-inch or just under a 17-inch box by 8 by whatever, right? So it's kind of bulky, like just think a large shoebox, right?
Uh-huh.
That's kind of the volume of the product, right?
Yeah.
And we're selling it for $35. We had $10 margins, and so we would make $10 on every sale. Our storage cost in non Q4 was like 20 cents, and during Q4 it was roughly $1, or it's like 80 cents or something like that. And
Yeah.
so, of course, part of me sees that bill of like $80,000. I'm like, oh my God. All right. No, we're not storing anything ever. We're never storing anything. Nope. And then, but I was like, well, wait a minute. We have to store some inventory, right? So I kind of started thinking like, okay, well, so really, actually, if I lose a sale, I lose $10. My opportunity, what's that cost? That's the opportunity cost. The opportunity cost of a sale, of a lost sale, is $10.
Mm-hmm.
The cost of overstock by a month, let's say I have a month overstock, that would cost me between 20 cents and 80 cents, right? Kind of depending on what season we're in, right? Q4
Right.
or non-Q4.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, well, I should lean towards overstock
Mm-hmm.
like 10 times or 40 times, right? If I'm let's just average and say it's like 40 cents, right? Versus $10
Yeah.
margins. What is that? Like a 25x multiple? Like
Yeah.
I should lean towards overstock 25 times more,
Yeah.
towards overstock versus understock.
Yeah.
Is that reasoning correct? Or am I missing something?
Yeah, because it's kind of like it's when you're talking about this, I think of listen to a talk from this guy Garrett Gunderson, who's he has this company called the Wealth Factory, and he talks the same way about taxes. If you're worried about paying a lot of taxes, you shouldn't be like restricting. Oh, I don't want to take on the money and all that. You should be making another dollar. You should be making more money. So you're going to pay because you it's the same type of thing. If you spent a lot, I mean, it's not always the case. If you're not selling and you're paying a bunch in storage fees, then that's a problem. But if you are trying to restrict and potentially are going to stock out, the the payoff of making that sale is far higher than the money that you're going to spend, to actually get there. So yeah. I mean, of course, if you can improve the sell through in a way that's not going to, you always have to weigh the costs. And I like to run different scenarios. Like, well, what if I, held back inventory and I sent inventory in once a month? What would happen then? And how much would it cost me then to send, like, maybe small parcel delivery, maybe, LTL? What's going to be the most cost effective? And that's one of the things that I'm obsessed with. And that, is the next direction that we're going to be headed with the software is, like, no one is running these scenarios. No one is sitting there and actually calculating out, does it make more sense to buy, 6 months of inventory from my supplier at a 5% discount, or am I going to pay 7% additional, in terms of storage fees? Like, no one's running these scenarios. And when you start running these scenarios, it really becomes insightful. It can be very eye-opening. So sometimes it just makes sense to take the time to sit down and run those scenarios.
Can I tell you what we do?
Mm.
So we have this big order spreadsheet that we look at the next 15 months. So and the reason why I do 15 months is because I update every quarter. So I always want to have a 1-year plan. Yeah. And so every quarter, of course, it kind of expires. So we always want to have a 1-year plan. So we plan out 15 months. Mm-hmm. We look at all those orders. We try to optimize. This is at least the brand I sold. Now we're a little bit smaller, so we don't have to do this as much. But this is 2 years ago. This is before SoStocked. Now we use SoStocked to do this. But before that, we were doing about a container every 5-ish weeks, 40-foot container. Yeah. And then we would do a full, I had the big spreadsheet would estimate the storage cost, the production cost, the freight cost. I had a little equation that like did the freight cost for me. Yeah. And then we would then export that out into like a cash flow manager. That's also just a spreadsheet. And we would do a full, big, beautiful analysis to figure out how much we need to order and then how much that would cost when that money would hit our bank account, and then kind of manage the whole thing. It took forever to build that out. And it was really fragile and kind of shitty, honestly. And like, I have an applied math degree. So that's like what I do. I like model things, and like, it's still so hard to do. That's tough.
It's a lot. It's a lot. We're actually going to be releasing, I wanted to build a carton calculator, and that's kind of one of the other topics I wanted to touch on is like, I call it profit optimization across the supply chain. And this is something I've always been thinking about, like, how can we fit more units in a container, on a pallet, and all of that. Carton is one of those things that I think was overlooked, especially because, at least for, who I was working with, there weren't these carton weight minimums that have now come into freight forwarding. And we went to ship some inventory, and our cartons were 7.7 kilograms. And we were told, well, there's a new minimum now. There's a 12 kilogram minimum. And so every carton is going to be charged at a minimum of 12, no matter how much it weighs. So we were at 7.7. So we had a lot of additional fees that were coming our way. And that was when I realized, well, we need to know what the optimum number of units per carton is, and the optimum number of the optimum size. Like, what are Amazon's requirements? What are our freight forwarders' requirements? What's the U.S. Customs requirement? Fit all those in, find the perfect. We want to fit as many units per carton, unless it's a slow seller. If it's a slow seller, you want you don't want more than, say, 2 months worth of inventory. Because if you're selling half a unit a day, then, you have 150 units, that's going to be a problem.
I can tell you the answer.
Yeah.
I know the answer is you have 3 restrictions on cartons. You can only put in 150 units in a carton. You have 50-pound limit, which includes the packaging. That is both a Amazon and a US whatever, the OSHA requirement. Actually, you can't package over 50 pounds unless it's a team lift. Yeah. And the limits are 25 inches on the sides of every side. And so what we do is we look at the weight, and usually the weight gives us the limit. But if it's not, then we just take 25. We always give an inch. So we say 24. How many units can we ship? Assuming a 24 by 24, we just divide in how many packages we can get in there. And then if that gives us the volume restriction, and then the weight restriction would be 100, we say 48 pounds, right? So just give us 2 extra pounds. So 48 pounds divided by the weight of the product. And that usually gives us a number. And then, so we'll get something like 33 and a half units can go in. Well, that's stupid. We can't get 33 and a half, right? So then we'll do 32, which would be like 2 by 4 by 24 would
Yeah.
give you 32. That's
Yeah.
how we do it.
Yeah. 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 And you said something very important, which was, 25 is the minimum or is the maximum, but that's going to shoot you in the foot, like majorly. That's a huge problem. Going to 24 makes all the difference. You know why? Because pallets are 40 by 48. So if you do a 25-inch carton, you can't fit two in that 48 space. You're screwed. So when we were building out our calculator, and it will be coming out hopefully later this month, which is February, that we built the calculator to build the perfect carton based on those requirements. And then I realized that's not the end goal. The end goal is to fit the most units per pallet. So we built out pallet, we reverse engineer, we took, let's know, we know what your unit size is and we know what your pallet size is. So between those two, we need to figure out what the perfect size and configuration is for your cartons. And so that we can maximize, get as close to 100% storage volume utilization on your pallet. And so I think there were 64 per configuration. And I think there were 6 configurations and 64 iterations of that I built out in a spreadsheet and sent to our development team. And you have to figure out what is the perfect, calculation. So that being said, like it's all part of the same conversation. And, we've got, On Pallet, which is a free tool that helps you to optimize your pallet based on your current carton. But we don't have any tool currently until we launch this thing to calculate what is the best carton configuration to fit as many units per carton and to optimize your cartons, because they have to weigh enough and they have to not weigh too much, and you have to fit as many units per carton because you have per carton fees. So you want as many units to be utilized to disperse those fees over as many units as possible. So these are
Oh,
the things that I geek out on, that like I
yes.
get obsessed
Yes, I
with.
love it. I
Yeah.
love it. Now, anybody who's listening to us and is like, "Oh my God, these guys are such complete nerds."
Yeah.
I totally phased out when when they started talking about the dividing, optimizing the per product whatever thing. Like, that's
Yeah.
okay. Please come
That's
back.
yeah. That's why we
Listen
make
back to us.
people.
This is why Chelsea made the tool for us. This is why she made the calculator, because like the nerds like us talk about how having to spend 4 hours geeking out 4 hours in a spreadsheet, but you can just go in and push that button. Maybe not yet, but I guess by the end of Feb we'll have we'll be able to push that button, ignore all the math shit, and just like get the answer and move on. So yes, Chelsea, that's fantastic. I love it.
Corey and I talk about these things, and people just like it's not exciting to people. I like to say I talk about the boring stuff, but I'm passionate about the boring stuff, and people get a lot more passionate about the boring stuff when they start seeing, $50,000 immediately added to their bottom line. This is the stuff that aggregators are doing. I've had talks with, with the guys at Elevate and some other places that they look for all of the things that you're not optimizing. And one of those things is, can we get the package smaller? We've got these new dimensional weight fees. Can we get the package smaller? How much is that going to save us per unit? The configuration that I did on this one product that I mentioned that kind of got me down this rabbit hole, I saved in just changing, with the weight fees and the carton pull fees and the carton labeling fees, I saved 68 cents per unit with just that alone. So it can be major. And imagine that across your entire, or some variation of that across your entire catalog. This is what aggregators are doing to immediately earn back equity.
Nice. Yes, I love it. And here's the thing, guys, is that like again, there's a lot of like nerd shit we're talking about, but like a lot of these things are really easy to do. And the carton optimizer thing, like that, I always tell people like it's super easy. Just do the, use Chelsea's tool or just do the math yourself. And like this isn't like a huge redesign. It isn't this $10,000 marketing campaign. It's not a $3,000 video thing. It's not these like big, crazy, complicated things. You just tell your supplier like, yo, you know how you're packing it like 2x2x2? Like pack it 4x4x4, and I'm gonna like 10x or whatever that is, 8, I guess 8, whatever, some number, 8x or something. My number of units, and it's gonna have my costs for the carton stuff. And it doesn't like, it's actually cheaper for them because they have fewer cartons that they have to print, right? And so
Yep.
like it's cheaper for everyone. It's just more efficient. And so these are the things I love.
Mhm.
Chelsea, I want to, before I move into the three questions I like to ask all entrepreneurs, I
Yeah.
also want to get your take on having to use FBM, fulfilled by merchant
Yeah.
3PL services.
Yeah, I believe that it's extremely important. I believe everyone needs to have an FBM trigger that they can pull, because we have seen that Amazon, we can't trust them to be our distribution center. Like, if even if it's our only sales channel, it should not be our only distribution channel. We've seen when stockouts happen, and FBM sales contribute to restock limits. So if you go out of stock because Amazon has not checked your stuff in, and we're waiting and we're waiting and we're waiting, which is a whole topic in and of itself, why that's happening. But if you're waiting for Amazon and they don't, check your stuff in, you need to have a way to make sales and to fulfill those sales. And so FBM is important for that reason. And also, like I said, those sales will keep your restock limits from tanking, even if you stock out at Amazon, because Amazon does count those sales. They also count, any of your multi-channel fulfillment sales. So if you're running Shopify through Amazon, those add to your restock limits as well. So those are kind of some ways to additionally keep your restock limits maintained even within a stock out.
Nice. I totally agree with that. And in case you guys didn't know, I think a lot of people know this, but just want to make sure everyone knows that you can actually have an FBA and an FBM listing at the same time. And you
Mhm.
can make it so that the FBA listing will always be the one that people default to. And then once the FBA inventory goes out, it goes to FBM, fulfilled by merchant. Well, it's going to get complicated if I try to explain how to do it. But you just know that, yes, it can happen. It's very easy. And if you don't know how to do it, you can just look on YouTube, or if you still don't figure it out, go ahead and email me and I will tell you. I'll give you a little SOP on how to do it. So Chelsea, yes, I love it. Thank you so much for giving us all that great content, great information on how to do inventory management. Now I want to get into the fun part. I love talking to everybody, all the entrepreneurial people, about a little bit of their entrepreneurial stuff. And we have the same three questions that we asked everybody. The big thing I love hearing from people, especially a person like you who's a serial entrepreneur, has had multiple businesses in multiple different spaces.
Yeah.
Why?
Mhm.
Why do you do it? Why not just get a day job and like work at a desk or whatever? Like, what's your drive behind building these businesses?
I like the journey of creating something, but mostly, and I think one of the reasons I gravitate towards, having businesses that help entrepreneurs is that I love entrepreneurs. I want entrepreneurs to succeed, and I recognized in inventory something that I was struggling with, and in asking my friends, they were struggling with. And so realizing how much margin was being lost there. And there are a lot of businesses that can go out of business because they don't have, this operations side right. And there are people who could be making a lot more money and having a lot less stress and enjoying their lives a lot more if they could recover even 5% of their margins. So, and many of these people are now my friends. So that's kind of the biggest motivation for me, is knowing that when I educate, when I build these tools, when I help people, it's having that direct effect of putting money back in people's pockets. When someone comes to me and says that they cut their savings because they didn't have to airship anymore. They were now doing, shipping by ocean because they got their inventory, sorted out. They're now making, say an extra 60% in savings on their shipping costs. Like, that's major. So, that's why I do what I do, because I know that it has the feedback loop is really great, and it has a direct impact on people's lives.
Oh, I love that. I love that. What is one piece of media, a book, a podcast, or something that you want to share with the audience?
My favorite book is The One Thing. It goes against everything within my nature, which is to try to do everything at once. And it, tells you what is the one thing, you could do such that by doing it, everything else would be easier or unnecessary. And that's what I always have to focus on whenever I feel like I'm, because I create this list and I feel really bad when I don't get through these, impossible lists. I have to remember, okay, if I did my one thing, then I'm moving closer to my goal. And half of these things wouldn't be on my list if I properly did the one thing. And it really forces you to not just to focus, but also to pull yourself out of your business so that you're building and focusing on processes and people, which is something that I tend to go, well, forget it. I'm going to do it myself because I'm, better at everything or whatever, whatever the case is. You're not going to grow and scale a business that way. And so it kind of helps you and forces you to move into the direction of being an actual, business owner rather than, someone who just works for yourself.
I love that. Yeah, the one thing is one of my favorite books too. I love that motto. I used to have a whiteboard behind me. I upgraded to a cool map of the world behind me now, but I used to have a whiteboard and I wrote on there, what's the one thing you can do that by doing, how's it, by doing such,
Yep.
everything else becomes easier or unnecessary?
Yes,
How does that
exactly.
go?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
One thing you could do that such that by doing it.
Nice. Yes, I love it. And exactly what you said, it hurts my soul to do that because I have like entrepreneurial ADD. And I'm like, oh, I can totally do this. Oh, I can totally do that. I can do this. I can update this thing. I can like update my packaging. I can do some new campaign or some new Facebook campaign, or I can like message this thing or whatever. And no, what is the one thing we can do that makes everything easier?
Yeah. And sometimes it's not your favorite thing. Like sometimes it's, the thing that you don't want to do, because oftentimes we end up continually doing, it's called hobby horsing, your favorite hobby horse, your favorite thing that you like to do. And it's not always the thing that is going to, put the most money in your pocket or move you, the furthest, the fastest. So that's another hard pill to swallow that, that equals growth.
Productive procrastination.
Yes.
Productive procrastination is the worst kind of procrastination. Yeah. Because like if you're just playing a video game or like staring at the wall or something and procrastinating, that you're just procrastinating. But when you're being like quote unquote productive, I'm not procrastinating. I'm doing you're not doing the right thing though. You're doing a bunch of filler time stuff. So yeah, the one thing, I love it. Great.
Yeah.
Chelsea, what is one actionable thing that Amazon sellers can do today?
Yeah. That they can do today. I mean, you would like to say sign up for SoStocked, which I do think people should do. I honestly think this year needs to be the year that people really focus on their inventory and also their profit optimization across the supply chain. I think the most important thing to do is to reassess your packaging from the ground up. So we're talking about, how are you what's the size of your packaging? Can you get that smaller? My friend Travis Ziegler talks about how he had, these sunglasses and he took the case out of the sunglasses and decided to put it in one of those, those smaller, like, sleeve cases. And that reduced the size, it increased the amount that he could use, send per carton. So reassessing from the ground up. It also, with these dimensional fees, it could bump you back into the unit fees. If people know about dimensional fees, if you don't, go read about dimensional fees, but it's extremely important. I think that's where you're going to see the most bang for your buck. I think people can recover, tens of thousands, even over $100,000 inside of their business simply by repackaging, recartoning, optimizing your pallets and optimizing your containers. I think that's some place where people don't explore, which is why we're building out tools. And the tool that will come out, hopefully it's out by the time this podcast releases. But if you want to learn about that tool, sostocked.com/headlines, if you sign up there, we'll be announcing that tool. And that will be a quick way for you to be able to reassess your pallets and your cartons.
Perfect. Yes, I love it. Chelsea, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. Go check out SoStocked and make sure you get a handle on your inventory. Thanks so much, Chelsea.
Awesome. Thank you.
Review from iTunes from Hello World. That's the name of the person. Hello World. Hi, Hello World. Motivating and no BS. Andrew has a unique ability to both motivate you and reassure you to start and grow your business. Very helpful. Thank you, Hello World. Thank you for that iTunes review. If you have not left an iTunes review, I would greatly appreciate it. Just go to iTunes, find the podcast, leave us a 5-star. If you want, you can leave a review. If you want, just hit those 5 stars. It really helps people find the podcast. Just like an Amazon product, iTunes also needs these product reviews too.